All right, welcome to the last day of class, everyone. So by popular decision, we are going to be discussing debugging your Python code today. I actually gave this lesson last summer as well. This was also what the class chose to talk about. So maybe I'll try to incorporate this more into the class as I go. But it is a really good skill to learn. It's very important. It's probably the hardest part about coding is learning how to read over your code and understand what's wrong. But I have good news for you. It is way easier to debug your code in August 2023 than it was in August 2022. And this is because of large language models and AI, such as ChatGPT and Bing GPT. Oop, my cat says time to go. He says, I can't sleep with you talking. All right. So we're going to be using Replit today, as always. And in case you forgot, today is the last class. I won't see you after this. So I already said what we were going to discuss, but it's the last day. Congratulations, you made it. There is no official certification for this class. Maybe we will get some sort of certificate in the future. But since I, did not grade anything for you, it is mostly a personal achievement, and I hope you do feel very proud. If you would like me to look over some of the code that you've done for the tasks, please do that as soon as possible. Even if it's a task from a while ago and you're like, hey, I'm just now getting to this, that's totally fine. All through August, I should be able to respond to you. I just don't want people asking me about tasks in October or November when I'm completely past the class. All right, so talking about debugging, what does that mean? Well, debugging is the process of fixing your code by reading your errors. I'll give you an error message. We're going to talk about how to read those because it is an art. Evaluating the code and checking for typos or anything that might be wrong, indentation errors. Make sure you're closing your parentheses, you're calling your functions, just going through a mental list in your head of what makes successful code and what you can look out for. And finally, Googling a solution or going to Bing GPT, ChatGPT, and asking for help there, which I will also go over. So some people, especially when they are learning and they're coming from a school environment, are afraid of Googling or asking ChatGPT because they have been told their whole academic life that that is cheating. But my friends, that is not cheating. That is what programmers do professionally all the time. There are a lot of jokes on the internet that say, you go to school for programming and you basically get hired to Google how to write code because you will run into errors no matter if you are a complete beginner or you've been doing this for decades. Googling a solution happens all the time. So please do not be afraid to try to solve this by looking at other resources such as Google or ChatGPT. It really is helpful. So first, we're going to talk about how to read the Python error messages. Sometimes we look at this red text and our brain just says, oh no, red text, that is bad, danger. It's not danger, don't worry. These errors are actually really useful to read. And the most useful part of the error is usually this last line here. So sometimes you may get a really long error and you are overwhelmed. You say, how am I supposed to read through this? Just look at the last line. Usually Python will tell you exactly what is wrong with your code. And this most useful information is in the last part here. So we have this code. Go ahead and look. I'll give you a couple seconds to read through this. So we're defining a main function, a equals 6. If a is less than 10, print a. And when we run this, it says indentation error, expected and indented block. So think about that. So it tells us exactly what's wrong. It says indentation error, expected an indentation, but there wasn't one there. And it even points to where this is. It says line 5, it points directly to this error. So if we go to line 5, we see that it's saying this needs to be indented and it is not. So what you're gonna do, and I was supposed to step through that indentation error. You can see it tells you what line of the code we were doing. I forgot I had these little nice arrows. And sure enough, over there, we don't have an indent after our if statement. So if we change this, now it works. Our code runs just as we wanted it to do. Great. So that was, one example. So go ahead and read this one and then tell me what is wrong with the code. Put in chat or raise your hand. Tell me what is this error telling us and how can we fix it? Ooh, yes, Brendan, I will mention rubber ducking, thank you. Sterling, do you know?
Sure. I got something to say. What is something more might do today?
Well, so we're looking at this right now and we're trying to see what can we do to fix this code.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yes, awesome. So we've got an answer here in the chat. Yes, we have divide by zero error. And if we look at this, we can actually see, it tells us that it says zero division error and division by zero. So somewhere we're dividing by zero. It's got this thing called a traceback. This is where Python is going through each line of code and then finding that error. The most useful one is usually the last one because that's the one that's causing the error. So we have, it tells us the file, tells us the line, and then it even says it's C equals A divided by B, division by zero error. So usually you just want to look at this last one here. And we can see line 5 is the problem. So let's look at line 5. And sure enough, if we set A equal to 5 and then B equals A minus 5, then B equals 0. And then C is A divided by 0, which is not good. Not what we want. So then we know that we can fix it. Okay, yeah. For a minute, I was like, how did I fix that? Okay, so we changed division to subtraction. Maybe that's what we meant. But the main key here is that we were able to figure out what that error is. So now C equals A minus B. And so that's not a divided by zero error. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple examples on Replit. Let me pull that up. I had it on my other computer. So I'm going to show you some examples, and then in a little bit, I'm going to ask you if you have any errors that you've been getting in your code that you would like to share or have me go through. Okay, called debugging. Oh, and before I forget, Brendan put a great comment in the chat. Thank you for that. So there is rubber ducking. And Brendan, if you would like to explain it in the chat, you're welcome to as well. But it is the concept of imagine, or sometimes actually have a little rubber duck that sits on your desk. And when you run into a problem with your code, you look at this rubber duck and you say, what is wrong with my code? And you describe the problem. And then sometimes just talking the problem out to a little inanimate object is really helpful. So I have actually a lot of little things on my desk. This is a little hedgehog. Where's my camera? Here's a little hedgehog. And so if I wanted to, I had, a problem. People actually do this. I see rubber ducks on programmers' desks all the time. And I'll say, okay, little hedgehog, look at my code. This is what I want my code to do, but currently it does this. It's just a little hack that you can do. And Brendan, if you want to explain how you use it, go ahead. But it's just fun. And it's basically just a way of saying you just need to think through the code. So if you can explain it to your little rubber duck friend, maybe just explaining it to someone is what's going to help you figure out what's wrong. Okay. So I've got a couple examples here on Replit. And we're going to see how we can solve these. Okay, so this first example, because I have, so just a little Replit thing, just so you know, I don't have these in main.py. I do have a main.py, but I'm looking at these example1.py, example2.py, and so on. Instead of running these using the run button in the Replit environment, run will only run main. So what you can do, and this is how you would run a Python file if you were doing it on your local computer as well, you would use the shell and you type Python 3 and then the name of the Python file that you want to run. So I have example1.py is what I want to run. So we've got this right here. I'm going to run it. It says enter your age. All right. Let's say 1. Okay, and now here we go. We have our error. So what is this telling us? Type error. Okay, type error. When you see type error, that means data type. Type is data type. This can only concatenate string, not int to string. And then I'm going to go up here and see what it's telling me. It says example1, line 4, a plus 10. Okay, and I have a equals input, enter your age. And what do you think could be wrong here? So it's saying we have something with string can only concatenate string, not int to string. So what is happening here? Yes, exactly. We didn't convert this to an integer. So we go up here, we convert a to an integer, and that will help us. So now if I run it after we convert to an int, it says enter your age, and it finishes running the program. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to happen. If I had some other error, so I'm going to tell you what this error is. I'm going to erase that parentheses where we convert to an int. Notice I have 2 open parentheses, one after int, one after input, and then I don't have 2 closing parentheses at the end. Let's see what that kind of error looks like. So if I run it again, syntax error, invalid syntax. This one is a little bit tricky because it's actually pointing to this line here. It's saying this is invalid syntax. So sometimes you need to look at it. And if you know this is right, look at the line before. Always count your parentheses. That's one thing you need to mentally have in your head. Always count your parentheses. So if you have 2 opening parentheses, you need 2 closing ones. So that is an example of what a parentheses, it's called a syntax error because it is thinking that you're still converting all of this to an integer because you didn't close this. You didn't have that extra parentheses there. So it is still looking to convert something to an integer, and then it gets to b equals a plus 10, and it says, I can't convert that to an integer. So that is what that error might look like. Okay, next one. So here we go, here we go. See if you can spot that error. I'm going to run example 2. Okay, name my list is not defined. What is wrong here? Yes, so, okay, we want to do an example of rubber ducking. So I'm inspired by Brendan, who says they have a Kiki's delivery service. I have a Totoro. I actually made this. I make a lot of little stuffed animals. So I keep this Totoro on my computer. And if I am looking at this, I'm like, okay, Totoro, it says my list is not defined. My husband's looking at me weird. He's like, why are you talking to your Totoro right now? This is my list is not defined. All right, let's see. We have my list. Where do I define it? Up here, there's an underscore. Thank you, Totoro. All right. So that's an example of rubber ducking. Yes, so thank you for the person who put it to the chat. Yep, we're missing that underscore. So great job. We're missing the underscore here. And now if we run it, Python 3, and here we go. And it does exactly what we want. It prints the 1 index of this list, which is the value 2. All right. And I think I did want to do this next one as well. Okay, I'm going to run this one and then go ahead and put in the chat what is wrong with this code. Oh, first Miranda has to type correctly. Ooh. All right. Go ahead and think about it and then put in the chat what is wrong with the code and what can we do to fix it. Couple more seconds to put in your answers. How could we fix this code? All right, got a couple of answers. Thank you so much for those answers. So if we look at this here, it says syntax error, invalid syntax, and it's pointing to line 4, which says if a mod 2 equals 0, and it points right at that equal sign. It says this is invalid syntax. And a couple of you caught it. We actually need a double equal sign because we're checking the value. So if a mod 2 equals 0, that means if a divided by 2 has a remainder of 0, then we're going to print that our number is even. Great job. Remember that this is mod. And yep, people are saying, that equal sign. So annoying. Yep, we need a mod 2 equals 0. Great job, everyone. Okay, so the next part, we will come back to some of these examples, but I did want to touch on, what if there is no error message? Waiting for my slides to load. So right now I just have a black screen. So we're used to seeing that Python error message that is kind of scary looking, but sometimes there is not an error message. The code doesn't behave how we want it to behave, or maybe we wanted to print something and it doesn't print. And so sometimes this kind of error will occur because Python is interpreting your code in a way that you didn't expect. So maybe you had a goal for your code, but it's not running the way that you intended, that you designed it. So there's a couple of steps you can follow to help this. And this is also where using your little rubber ducky can help too. So if you read through your code slowly and evaluate it in your head, we have practiced this a couple of times in class where I'll show you some code and say, what does this code do? So try doing that with your code. Look at your code, act like you're not the one that wrote it, you're just looking at some code, look at it, read through it and say, what does this code do? Think about, if it has to do with numbers, think about what if I put in a negative number? What if I put in an integer? What if I put in a float? Think about the code, evaluate it in your head. What do you expect the computer to do with this code? Then check if you made the proper function calls, like main. Probably the number one problem that I see with beginner coders and even experienced coders is that you'll define your main function and then at the very end you won't call main. And so your program reads your function definition and says, great, I know how to define main. And then you're like, oh, I want you to actually do that. So then you need to call your functions. So look for function calls. And then third, check indentation. Indentation can sneak up on you. In Python, a tab using the tab key is different than using 5 spaces. It's different than using 2 spaces. It's different. Spaces are all different in Python. So I always use tab. Some people use like press the spacebar twice. For me, tab is easiest. So make sure that all of your code is indented correctly. And sometimes it helps to just redo the indentation. So put everything back at the margin and then indent it correctly from there. Sometimes you may have just accidentally added an extra space into your code without meaning to. And finally, if you still can't figure it out, Google. We're going to talk about this, but first, I want you to look at this code, which runs, but not the way it's designed. So I put a comment up here. It says goal. I want this code to print correct if A is less than 10 and A is even. So I'm going to show you what happens when I run this when A equals 2. Okay, so this is what happens when it runs if A equals 2. It says checking if A is even and then correct. And now I'm going to make A equal to 2000. Run it again. And it still says correct, even though I only wanted to print correct if A is less than 10 and A is even. So obviously 2000 is not less than 10, but it is still printing correct. So what is happening here? Go ahead and put in the chat. Why is our code not working the way we want it to? Okay, just a couple more seconds. Read through the code carefully. All right, and yes, a couple people did get it there in the chat. This if statement needs to be indented inside the first one. Right now, they're not associated with each other at all. We check if A is less than 10. If it is, we're going to print checking if A is even. Then the next line, just completely separate. If A is even, we're going to print correct. So it's actually going to print correct regardless of how big or small the number is. So if we indent this, then it's only going to check this if statement if it gets past this one with A is less than 10. So if we indent this correctly now and run this, and perfect. So we didn't want it to print anything if A is greater than 10. Now let's see. I'm going to make A 2. See if this works now. And it does. It prints correct. Let's check it with 1. Oops. Let's check it if A equals 1. And perfect. So it does get to this checking if A is even, but it's not going to print correct. So exactly. Good catch for that indentation error. There was no message, but we just had to go through our code a bit and see what's wrong. Okay, and then finally, not exactly, I don't like to say last resort, but I do want you to have the skills of reading through your code before you go to Google, because it is good for you to understand, how your code works and how code works in general. That will make your coding life easier. But finally, if you aren't sure how to fix your code, Google it. There are some good websites. So when you Google, obviously you get a bunch of different pages. Some of the ones that I recommend, Stack Overflow, that is a forum that allows you to post a question and then people can comment on it and upvote the best answers. I don't actually post to Stack Overflow. I just search Google to see other people's Stack Overflow posts, because a lot of the times people are running into the same errors as you are, and then people are able to respond to it. One thing about that is that it is Stack Overflow. It's a forum, public forum on the internet, so sometimes people can be rude. But it is very useful when you're starting to learn to code, to Google something and then find the Stack Overflow search for it and see if your error is there. And maybe you can see what other people said to explain why that error is happening. Another great resource is W3 Schools. This is a free website that will often have, Python tutorials on it. So if you're just searching, how do I make a list in Python, W3 Schools is a great website to look at anything like how to do this in Python. Geeks for Geeks is another one. It used to be free. I think it's kind of free, but after a certain number of pages you view, you have to pay for it. So I don't recommend that one as much anymore, but it does have good content. And added this last bullet because we're in 2023. We are in the modern age of being able to ask AI to look over our code, and this works surprisingly well. So we're going to demo that as well. And yes, a really great tip in the chat by Brendan is copy and pasting your code or your error code works great. So it's just like if you had come up to me and you said, my code doesn't work. Okay, well, that gives me no information whatsoever. I don't know why your code works. There could be a million reasons, but if you say, my code doesn't work, this is what I'm trying to do, and this is the exact error message that I have, then I can know what to do with that. And the same with, people on the internet, the same with ChatGPT, the same with Google. Putting in your error code really helps because that error code does have important information in it. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple, maybe one more example from me. And then I'm going to open up the floor for people to offer up their own errors that they've come across, if anyone has some. Forgot to tell you to prepare anything, but if you have errors ready and you're like, my code doesn't work, I want to show you, I will open up the floor for you to do that in a little bit. Okay, so here's this last one. Let's see, Python 3, example 5.py. All right, we got an invalid syntax. What's happening here? How can we fix it? Go ahead, read through the code, read this error message, and then tell me, how can we fix this? Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for putting your answers in the chat. Okay, great. Yes. A lot of people caught it. It says invalid syntax. It is because, so if we look at this function definition, we have two arguments here, A and B, and those need to be separated by a comma. Here, they're just separated by a space. So I do need that comma there. to be able to run this. You can have a space after the comma, but you absolutely need that comma there. So it is saying invalid syntax, and it points to this right here. It says that is wrong. Okay, great job, everyone. So now if I run this again, and it runs perfectly. Awesome. So I think I do have a main.py, but I don't think, no, that was something else. So just an example. Let's see, I want to show you using ChatGPT. Which one should I send to ChatGPT? Let's see. Okay, so I want to send you the example of this one. So I'm going to unindent this again, and let's see if ChatGPT can catch this error, because there's no error message, which makes it a bit hard. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this code. I'm going to go to ChatGPT, OpenAI. There's a couple different ways. You can use GPT 3.5. This is cheaper. GPT-4 I have access to through my job. I'm going to use GPT-4 in this example, but you can also use Bing, GPT, and others. Actually, I'll use 3.5 because most people can access this one. Okay, so what I'm going to say, I wrote Python code, which I want to print correct if the given number is less than 10 and is even. Or it is not working as intended. How can I fix this? And then I am going to paste my code directly in there. ChatGPT is going to tell me exactly what's happening. So it says, the issue with your code is that you are checking if A is even after the first condition that checks if A is less than 10. Both of your if statements are independent of each other. So the second if statement will always be evaluated regardless of whether the first condition is met. That's just like we were saying with the indentation errors. To fix this, you should combine the conditions using and. So both conditions need to be true for correct to be printed. Here's the corrected code. So this is another way to solve that error. It certainly works just as well. In this case, ChatGPT selected using and, which is perfectly fine. So if I copy this code, you can actually click on copy code. And then if I get rid of this altogether and just replace it with what ChatGPT has, change that to 2. Hello. Did this save? Oh, I want to run example. What example is this? Example 4. All right, run the write Python file, step 1. Okay, and it prints correct. And now if I make this a huge number that is greater than 10, it does not print correct. So very, very useful tool. This is a simpler example, but this is really great for if you have some weird error, you don't know how to solve it, you absolutely do not know what to do. Try typing it in here, try an LLM. Really great. I will say that with a caveat of be sure to copy the code that it gives you and then run it and make sure that that actually does work, because there's always the chance that it generates code that doesn't work. But that gives you a really interesting workflow of running the code it gives you. And then if there's an error with that code, coming back and saying, hey, ChatGPT, this code that you wrote for me actually doesn't work. And it runs into an error. So an example that I had most recently, so it actually saves all of my things over here. I had earlier today, I was preparing an ocean data science tutorial. And actually the entire tutorial is about AI assisted programming. But I wanted to access some data. And I said, how do I access this data? And it actually tells me, it says, okay, so what I put in, how do I access ArgoViz data using these libraries in Python? If you don't know what those words means, that's okay. It's very ocean science based. I wanted to access some data. It actually tells me, it gives me the code to access the data, and then tells me what libraries I need, and then how I can even plot it. And so I have this whole chat history going back with ChatGPT, asking it, all right, now I want to make a map with this data. Now I want to do machine learning with this data. Now I want to adjust this plot of this data, and it is really great. So just an example of how I used ChatGPT just today when I was developing my own AI assisted tutorial for actually a conference that I'll be traveling to next week. Okay. So Googling, ChatGPT, reading through your code, all great tools. Yes, Raymond, you should be able to unmute.
I don't normally do this. I'm usually specific, but just out of curiosity, are there issues with, say, using import TensorFlow as with an asterisk instead of going through the and from TensorFlow import Keras dot blah 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 blah, which is how I usually do it?
Oh, no. So let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So I'm just gonna get rid of this. So there's, import TensorFlow. Then there's, from TensorFlow import Keras, right? And so are you asking about from TensorFlow import star?
Yes. I haven't
No.
used the third option, and I didn't know if it made a difference. I thought about it when you showed your example, because not because I wanted to talk anyone to death about your specific example, but with the code I do, I was just curious about that.
No. So
Yeah.
I usually don't do this just because it's the same as, well, it works a little differently. There's no problems with it. It probably is a little, I'm trying to think.
See,
So
for
with,
me, my Keras is nested within my TensorFlow.
yeah, so then you need to do from TensorFlow import Keras to access Keras.
Okay, that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah. So
yeah.
with this, it just imports all of the classes inside of TensorFlow, which is totally fine. I usually say import, TensorFlow as TF or whatever, and then from TensorFlow import Keras if I want specifically Keras. I just do it with the ones that I want, and then if I want to access something that's not included, I just use TF dot whatever. Does that make sense? But there's no problem with importing star. That's totally fine too.
Yeah, I was just curious because I thought it might save me some carpal tunnel later on with some of the stuff I'm doing.
Maybe, but not a lot, probably.
Just a quick question. I had a better version of what I originally emailed you. My problem with the ambiguous exception errors I have is, okay, my brain, Stack Overflow, and official documentation all say the code block is correct. I end up having to say, like, if that was my block 14, having to split it up line by line. Then, shock and all, out of one of those, it finally shows me a trace back to code block 3. And that's where I'm hitting a snag because that's very common for the work I do. But my understanding is it's very rare in general, which is why I can't find the solutions on Stack Overflow or official documentation. That was why I was trying to ask if there was like any just like pro tip or anything to not have to deal with that headache, because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. So for errors like that, if I'm understanding correctly, I definitely encourage use of LLMs or whichever one you want to use, because then you can give it your code and tell it what's happening, or your data or whatever. As for like what specifically is happening, not really sure, but yeah, I totally get it. The debugging is a bunch of headaches. Awesome. I love it. Okay, so any other questions, or does anyone have examples of an error that they found in their code that they'd like to share, or that they would like to work through, or maybe just reminisce? Oh, so I'm saying LLM not MLM. LLM, it stands for large language model, which is what we're talking about when a lot of people say AI or generative AI. Sterling, do you have an example or a question?
Sure. I have something I'd like to share. What is the seven question means you have a good time in camp. That's good, right?
Yeah,
Thank you. That's very nice.
thank you. Okay, anyone have some errors? I should have come prepared with some of my code, but I forgot. If not, that's totally okay. You are also welcome to ask some questions. Yeah, I didn't warn any of you I was going to ask this. Okay. Well, if no one has an example to share, totally fine. I do have some extras to leave you with before we officially close out our last class of the summer. So from here, I recommend learning pandas. This is a library in Python that is very useful for data science, which is a common Python, which is a common use case in Python. So I highly recommend using learning some data science tools like pandas. You are fully equipped to do that now. Giuseppe, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question, but I want to say that I'm so excited that this is the last day of this coding program.
Yeah, hopefully because you liked it.
Yeah, let's rock.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad. I'm
You're
really
welcome.
excited too.
Yeah, you're
I'm
welcome.
really glad we've made it. So thank you, Giuseppe. Yes, so we've made it to the last class. So you officially have a lot of Python tools available to you. So extras, I recommend learning pandas. I use pandas all the time. And finally, what I want to leave you with, well, I think I have a couple other slides, but please fill out this survey. I made this survey, it's completely anonymous, so that we can get feedback and improve our course for future years. There is a part at the bottom where you can put in extra, feedback if you just have, it's a long text form. So there's a couple multiple choice, and then also the option to put in suggestions. So I'm going to put that link in the chat there. If you should have access to all of the slides anyway, so you can keep that open. I'll keep that open for maybe the next month or two to give everyone time to do it. But if you're here, go ahead and do that today. So I'll give you just a couple seconds. If you could just go ahead and fill that out right now. Or if you need more time, you can fill it out later. Also, we have our final task. I did create slides for that describe the project. You can click on those and see those. I am totally fine with answering questions about this task as well if you have questions. And if you would like feedback on your final project, you can email it to me or send it to me on Discord. Just be sure to send me your actual code, so like a Replit link or a Python file. Send that by August 15th, and I will give you feedback. And if you send it to me afterwards, I'll probably still give you feedback too, as long as it's not like months from now. Okay, those project slides are there. And lastly, just thank you. I've really enjoyed this summer. I've enjoyed seeing you all, learn and ask questions and grow and having this community together. So thank you so much. Been a very successful summer. Let me know if you need anything. The rest of the class today, open for questions, work on your project, fill out this exit survey, which I'll put up here, and just let me know what you think of the class. So thank you so much. That is all that I have for you today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your year, and hopefully we'll see you back for other classes that we may offer in the future. We'll probably have this one if you want to take it again, or maybe hopefully we'll have others. I don't know. Okay, Felix, did you have a question?
Yeah, two things. We can do the survey now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second,
I would like you to.
okay, next, just so you know, I've started working on the project, but I don't know if I'll be able to get it to you by the 15th because
That's
I'm
okay.
going on vacation on
Okay.
Saturday.
Yes.
Just
If
wanted to let
you,
you know in advance.
I appreciate it. Yeah, if you send it to me later, that's totally fine. Some people just would like a deadline, so I put it there. But it's totally fine if you send it to me later.
Thanks.
Awesome. Have a good vacation. Leo.
So I have a quick question. So for the final project, do you want to just like send it to like a Replit link or like a Python file? Does it matter which one we do or?
Yeah, either one, a Replit link or a Python file.
Okay,
Whichever,
so
however you write it, just send it to me there.
okay. So for like the Replit link, do we just copy like a link like on the browser or like how do we do that?
Yes, so let me go to Replit. So you can, I'm pretty sure you can just copy the link from the browser, but then they also have this like invite button and you can create like a link and then copy the link. So that's one way, but you can also just copy the URL, I'm pretty sure, and people will be able to get to it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you so much to my TAs. You have been so helpful. And yes, I will definitely want your help for next year if you're available. So everyone say thank you to our TAs. And if there, a couple of them are logging off. So I will see you next time. Okay, I am going to stop our recording.